The most important thing, first of all, is to recognize that the housing problem cuts across all groups, uh, younger, adults, seniors, people with neurodiversities. Everyone needs a home, and everyone is affected by the lack of affordable housing.
Welcome to Shoresides, a podcast where we explore the coastal North Carolina region's past, present, and future to promote community resilience. I'm Nicholas Magrino. In North Carolina, 1 in 40 children are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, according to the Center for Disease Control. This is higher than the national average. In the United States, about 25% of people with autism are able to live independently, with the rest either living with their parents or in supervised living facilities. But to a Wilmington nonprofit called Independent Works, it doesn't have to be that way forever. Independent Works is looking to construct a living community known as City Place in Wilmington for neurodiverse people and seniors to live with dignity. Sponsors for the project include the Cape Fear Collective, and in 2022, they received a grant from the new Hanover Community Endowment to engage the community while looking to break ground later this year. We'll speak to their president, Robert Ferber, about the problems facing neurodiverse people when it comes to housing and how Independent Works is finding solutions to them. And for Ferber, this mission is personal.
To give you a little background, I'm retired. I retired as a physician in 2021 after the worst waves of COVID-related hospitalization occurred. And in my retirement, I've found a lot of pleasure working for different nonprofits. But this one has particular meaning for me, and that's because I have a daughter, her name is Elizabeth, who is 33. She was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder when she was about 3 years old. And just like every parent, whether the child is normal, what we call neurotypical, or different, what we call neurodiverse, every parent wants the best for their child. And in my case, I was really interested in looking for options for housing for my daughter, since, that I think is a really important part of leading a fulfilling life. So currently she lives with me, and the hope is that she can live in a community which consists, to a certain extent, of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So people who are her peers, who she can socialize with and easily obtain their support and help them as well. And so I think that's a really brilliant idea that Independent Works had, which turns out to be not the only organization that's come up with such ideas. There's been quite a few across the country.
The issue of housing for neurodiverse people has been one that has often been overlooked.
You know, I'm almost 70 years old, and when I was in school, as a young person, people with neurologic disabilities were pretty much segregated into their own separate classrooms, and not much was expected of them. But that really started to change in the 1970s and 80s with various laws and a change in attitude across the country, which really recognized that every person has worth, and we should do what we can to maximize that person's potential and to include them as much as possible in the community. And there's really been a revolution in that, so that when my daughter was born in the 1990s, she was able to attend school with uh, her peers and the neurotypical and the neurodiverse, and participate in sports and have social activities, and through lots of different efforts from many organizations like Special Olympics and Access of Wilmington more recently. And this has all been really great progress. But the area of housing has long been ignored. And if it's difficult to get a handle on because the data sets are really not complete,
Even with that incomplete data, it's clear that the existing paradigm of housing for neurodiverse people is unsustainable and often unfair.
But what data we do have indicate that the vast majority of people with neurologic disabilities live with their families, and they will continue to live with their families until they cannot. And then what are their choices? Well, there's independent living, but only a small percentage really achieves that. Then there's things like group homes, which are very useful and terrific for people who require that kind of support, but also very limited and difficult to get into. And there's institutions like nursing homes and so forth. Now, in theory, there's support for people to have community living, but that theory is not always the reality. For example, one of the main sources of support for people with disabilities is something called the Medicaid waiver. And in North Carolina, the Medicaid waiver currently has a waiting list of about 15,000 people. Average time on that waiting list is about 14 years. Now, I moved here with my daughter 5 years ago from Delaware, where she did have that support through the Medicaid waiver. But when it came to North Carolina, it starts all over again. And so she's on the waiting list. And if she's average, will be there for another 10 years. That type of support allows people to live in the community. And some people require very little support, maybe somebody to remind them about medications or, drop in to see how they're doing. And other people, of course, require a lot of support. But that level of support typically costs a whole lot less than an institution does. And it's certainly better for the person in almost every case.
Given that situation, most parents of people with autism opt to care for their children at home. But, naturally, that can't last forever.
So if you look at the people who are living at home with their family members, that's great, except when their family members get too old to manage, die. And then you have an emergency situation. Some families are lucky. There's siblings who are willing to step up or other relatives. Some don't have that luxury. And then the person becomes an emergency situation for the state, usually, and at risk of homelessness. So there's a realization about these problems, and lots of organizations like Independent Works and City Place have tried to come up with innovative ideas to create housing specifically for this population.
Since some neurodiverse people can be limited in what work they can do, it leaves many of them in a difficult financial situation.
The majority of people with neurologic disabilities are unemployed or underemployed, even if they've achieved considerable levels of education. And that means that most of the people in this category of the neurodiverse are lower income people. And as you know, housing is expensive, whether it be rental or owning a house. It's out of reach for lots of people who have jobs, even good jobs. And for people who are lower income, it's a really big problem.
According to Ferber, what support the government can offer people in these circumstances can be insufficient.
Many people with disabilities of all kinds subsist on what's called Social Security income, or SSI. And SSI income comes to less than $10,000 per year. Well, as you can imagine, $10,000 a year will not rent you anything, and that's throughout the country. And not only will it not rent you anything, but you wouldn't have any money left for anything else. So, that's clearly an impossible situation. There are other programs to address that, such as housing vouchers, but they're a mess too. In our area, the housing voucher waiting list has not been open for 8 years. So, and that's just to get on the waiting list. And if you were lucky enough to get a voucher, you need to then find a place to use that voucher. And that's a problem too because of the scarcity of available places.
Independent Works is looking to solve the availability problem through collaboration with the local Wilmington community and other organizations.
What we're trying to do in our community is to utilize donations through a capital campaign and fundraising and grants through entities such as the city and county governments, the Hanover Community Endowment, as well as large national corporations, basically to provide the majority of the funding to do the actual construction. In addition, we're looking to collaborate so that, for example, the land that we expect to build on for City Place is a long-term ground lease that we have a letter of intent signed with a local church, which is St. Luke AME Zion Church. Like a lot of churches, especially in the downtown area, many of them have surplus land, and they're looking for ways to utilize that land, which helps the community and helps them fulfill their mission as they see it. And so the congregation and the leadership at St. Luke's, for example, has definitely thought that this mission of City Place to create a housing community for people with disability and also with seniors in this particular group really fits with what they think is a good use of their property. And so that collaboration will help us. And we're also in conversation with Habitat for Humanity to act as our general contractor, which would save us tremendously on construction costs. It helps expand what Habitat does, which is already great work in the community, but it's a whole new area that they're very interested in as well.
The other major issue Independent Works wants to solve is finding the support that neurodiverse people need in their day-to-day lives.
The City Place community that we're planning, for example, will have a robust use of technology, which should help in things like alarms and monitoring, which can enhance safety. So that it'll be possible, for example, to have medication reminders or just simple alarms or things like shutoffs on stoves and so forth. Because security and safety are a big concern for people who may not have the full abilities that we expect in the average person.
Ferber feels that public policy should take on the burden that a lot of families of neurodiverse people have carried for years.
The disabled group has long been invisible because their families have picked up the slack and taken care of them and will continue to do so no matter what. Same thing with seniors. Many seniors, are in a precarious situation financially, and it's not evident till you see a gray-haired person on the street, looking for money. So I think that the policy changes that are needed really are those that make it possible to develop housing in adequate density in areas where that's appropriate, as well as to decrease some of the burdens that exist in regulations and zoning that make starting a housing community to be such a difficult thing to do.
In addition to neurodiverse people, City Place also intends to house some seniors as well. Ferber feels that the issues these groups face can overlap and that together they can build an even stronger community.
Well, the overlap certainly is that affordability is an issue for both groups, at least for some of the seniors. But I think that the idea is that there's a possible synergy there between the younger adults with neurodiversity, who typically are able-bodied in many ways, and the seniors who may require assistance in certain things that require, um, younger, stronger bodies. And then in the reverse situation, you may have seniors who have a wealth of knowledge and experience who can share that knowledge and sort of mentor their younger counterparts.
According to Ferber, City Place is intended to be 0.6 acres composed of 8 principal homes and 8 accessory dwellings. It is intended to house 32 people. Independent Works intends to break ground this year. In the meantime, they're engaging their community thanks to a grant from the new Hanover Community Endowment.
I would like to be able to mention our website, is www.independentworks.org, and I invite people to take a look there and keep track of what developments are with our housing community, as well as our other activities, because we do host regular monthly activities for people who are interested, such as game night and movie night and parent connection group where parents can share their concerns with each other. We have about 400 people currently signed up to obtain our newsletter, and we're always glad to hear of other people who are interested.
From Shoresides, this is Nicholas Magrino. Learn more about Shoresides at shoresides.org. Thank you for listening.